How's it going? My name is Zach Johnson. I'm a professor at California State University, Fullerton, where I've been for 10 years. And before that, I worked at Murray State University in Kentucky for 2 years. And I got my bachelor's in communication studies from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I got my master's in student personnel from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And I got my PhD in instructional communication and educational leadership from West Virginia University. Dr. Valade asked me if I would talk to you a little bit today about the student misbehaviors paper that I wrote with CJ Klaus, Zach Goldman, and Michael Salido. Um, and I'm happy to do that. It was a fun paper to write. Those guys are buddies of mine, and that's a relevant piece of information because the paper came about because we were at a conference and we were talking about, hey, we should write a paper together because we're all about to start our careers, and then things are just it's never going to get easier than it is right now. So we were thinking about things that teachers do that we can maybe put into the context of student behavior because that's really what I like to study. And so student misbehavior sort of like came to mind, and we said, yeah, let's do that. That sounds interesting. Why not? And we'll just see what comes of it. And we asked our participants two questions. What do students do that interrupt the learning environment? That's how teacher misbehavior scholars have defined misbehaviors. And why is it that you think that they do this? And I'll speak to that in just a little bit about why that's an important question and why we asked that. But the data were really interesting because you could tell that it was very cathartic for a lot of these instructors to write about how students interrupt the learning environment. And we got everything from, they're on their cell phone. That was the biggest thing, like running away, or just other technology things to they bring really smelly meals to class or they're really mean to me and some of that data got really personal and really intense. So like I said, you could tell that it was really cathartic for some of those people. But we ultimately we analyzed the data and we arrived at something like 51 distinct misbehaviors. And it might have been 48 or 49. It wasn't exactly 50, but it was up there. And we presented that at NCA and got some good feedback. And in our mind, when we wrote the paper like that, we said there's no way that you can make this like these are 51 distinct things that students are doing. So we sent it to ComEd and then got an R&R decision back on it. And it was a really interesting R&R. They wanted us to sort of reanalyze our data and talking to the editor at the time, John Hess. Um, he was really supportive of it and he was really helpful. And he said, I want you to take it to this other level of abstraction and sort of like really talk to us about ways that we could do that. And the reviewers had asked us to think about them as active or passive misbehaviors, to take these to sort of collapse some of these things down um, from 51 behaviors into like a smaller number because as John has said to us at some point in that process, no one thinks in that level of detail in regards to these things. There's ways to combine some of these things. So, we took like failure to prepare for class or failure to prepare for an exam. We put all of that together. Um, you know, we made there were a lot of things that we collapsed as evidenced by the fact that there's now just 12 of them. Um, but we really didn't like the idea of making them active and passive because passive takes ownership away from the students. And something we really wanted to sort of suggest in the paper is that students have choices about the way that they act. Students have choices about the way that they behave in class. And saying that they're passive misbehavior sort of suggests that they're just a product of their environment. And while there is certainly evidence to suggest that their environment does influence and does drive some of the behaviors that they engage in, it's certainly not the only part of the equation. It's not a x equals y, it's an x plus y equals z situation. And so to say that it's just a passive thing, we really pushed back against that. The letter that I ended up writing back to the reviewers was, it was, 2 arms length, and it was just, I really had to make some arguments as to why we didn't do that. Ultimately, we arrived at this idea of saying that they were actions and interactions, things that they are doing that don't involve another person, or things that they're engaging in with another person. So like not preparing, that's an like not doing the reading. That's something that a student's doing of their own accord. It's not really driven by another person. Whereas like problematic participation or um like excessive socialization, those are right. Like they're interacting with the class and like the one person that won't stop raising their hand or is like really off base or something or they're too talking to each other too much. Um, those were we liked the action and interaction distinctions more. So, we got it published and we're really proud of it. It's something that I think is really interesting. Um, One of the other things that Dr. Vlade asked us to think about, or that she wanted us to talk about in these videos, was what questions remain to be studied. And we did have a second study come from this data set, and it was what are the antecedents to behavior, to these misbehaviors? What do teachers think are making students behave in this way? And we argue in that paper that it's even if it's not the reason, the perception that students are misbehaving in this way, that they're behaving in this way as a result of this thing, is enough to drive my response as an instructor. If I think you're not participating or you're not preparing because you are deficient in some way, like you don't have the skill set, like you don't have the best example would be like in a math class. You're coming to this calculus class because that's maybe what you quote unquote should be in for your major, but maybe you don't have the math for it. You don't have the building blocks for it. So you're not participating, you're not doing the homework or something. And so then when we have these discussions, when we do things in class, you're not able to participate. that's gonna that's gonna change the way that I interact with you as a student because maybe I can say, hey, why don't you come to office hours? Why don't you let me help you address this? Whereas if I think you're misbehaving because of like a lack of care towards your fellow classmates, the fellow members of the classroom community, like teachers and students included, that really shapes the way that you interact too, right? It changes the way that the instructor responds. And so in thinking about how we are responding or how instructors are responding to any type of behavior, misbehavior, appropriate behavior, whatever, um, even if it's not the exact reason, the perception that that is the reason is enough to sort of warrant study and warrant consideration. So what else do I think needs to be studied? I think there's quite a lot. I think that you could take these things. There's no scale for these things, and I've got a whole soapbox that I'll get on about the length of our scales. We don't need a scale to study 12 misbehaviors. What I think that instructional scholars could do, or communication scholars of communication and instruction, however you want to frame it, um, they could take any one of these misbehaviors or even just actions or just interactions and think about why students are engaging in it. What does that sort of lead to, or why is that happening from their perspective? Why are they doing it? Is it because the teacher's boring? Is it because the teacher's misbehaving and they're misbehaving because they're not able to like sustain the tension and stuff like that? There's quite a lot there. I think that there is, yeah, I wish I had a better sort of like closing statement, but this feels like a good place to wrap up. The misbehavior stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, I did have one more thing, and I knew that it was right there. I don't know if misbehavior is the right term, and this is more of like a rhetorical kind of position, but misbehavior makes it sound like they're doing something wrong. And I know that others have written about disruptive behaviors, and maybe that's a more appropriate term for these things because misbehavior it's real. punitive sounding, like students misbehaving. And anytime that I have to talk about this, it sort of springs to mind that, man, I don't love the sort of paradigm that is coming from. Is it something I can fix? No. I'm not really going to write much about misbehaviors moving forward. I've got other stuff. The I've really left the antisocial stuff behind. I really just study the pro-social stuff now. Um, it's a lot less heavy to sort of carry around with you every day. Um, but I think that there's a lot of ways that this could be studied quantitatively, qualitatively, even rhetorically, like I said. So, um, if you have any questions, if you want to chat about this anymore, I know that this is an online class. I'd be more than happy to talk to y'all or just exchange emails and correspond. Uh, my email address is zjohnson@fullerton.edu. And yeah, good luck to you in your course of study. I wish you the absolute best. Take care.